I'd like to take this opportunity to welcome everyone to the 1988-89 American International College Hockey Banquet. For those few of you who don't know me, my name is Larry O'Donnell. I've been the assistant hockey coach here for the last 3 years. Before we get on with our speakers, there's a couple of people that I'd like to acknowledge out in the crowd. There's a number of people I'll be acknowledging during the night, intermittently, and on behalf of the AIC hockey team, I'd like to thank them. Some of their work behind the scenes, different departments on campus, are very helpful to us in what goes on off ice. I'd like to start off by acknowledging Vice President John Fallon, and Vice President Rich Berdard. We came here this afternoon, myself and Coach Wright, to set up this, help set up, I should say. I helped. Coach Wright didn't do much helping. He just interfered a lot. We had to throw him out of here at 4:30, otherwise we'd still be setting up. I'd also point out that he was the last one to arrive tonight. Our first speaker tonight, I owe something to, especially in the last few weeks. I was able to call home to my mother for the first time and tell her that I had my first real job. Hopefully that will enable me to get a new car someday. But the first gentleman I'm bringing up is our Director of Athletics. He's been very supportive of our hockey program, Mr. Robert Burke.
Thanks, Larry. It's a pleasure to be here this evening and to represent the athletics department. Very special occasion. I'd like to thank all of the college people for coming. Especially it's nice to see so many parents here to participate in the program, and of course all of the student athletes. I know this is a very special evening because it's the first time since the last hockey game that I've seen Coach Wright in a tie. You know, Coach Wright was up at the University of Maine, and we were having a lot of trouble with our hockey program. I mean, we were having a lot of trouble with it. And so Blaine Stevens and I got together. We decided to go out and try to find a guy who was going to be nice and liberal and flexible to work with and everything. So Gary Wright came down. He didn't have a tie on, so we decided we'd go ahead and hire him. Little did we know he's about 2 steps to the right of Attila the Hun. No, actually, I learned this, that Blaine Stevens purchased Gary's first tie and gave it to him on Christmas 2 years ago. It's a very, very big improvement. As I said, Gary came to us from the University of Maine, and we were very, very fortunate to be able to have a person of his caliber come and coach our hockey program. I wasn't kidding when I said we were having a lot of trouble with our hockey program. For a number of years, going way back, we've had great hockey tradition here, just tremendous hockey tradition. We have a great hockey alumni. And we went through a period of time of about 5 or 6 years where we had some part-time coaches working for us in the program. And our program wasn't heading anywhere. We were just at a stalemate. And it came time to make some real serious decisions about hockey. And we decided, because of the strength of the program in the past, and we were going to try to do something about it. And fortunately, Blaine Stevens, who's the Dean of Students, helped and made it possible to put this position together so we could go out and hire a full-time person. Well, we hired Gary, and I guess everybody knows the rest. Over a period of time, our hockey program has developed into what I call a real quality program. We're one of the finest hockey programs there is around in the East, and we're just getting better and better. The first year I said to Gary, I didn't care if we won a hockey game. I just wanted to straighten things up in hockey. And we struggled at first. We struggled the first couple years. And last year, for the first time, we made the playoffs. And this past season, not only did we make the playoffs, but we won in the playoffs. And we're looking forward to the future of our hockey program, not only to be in the playoffs consistently, but we're looking to be a winner in the ECAC. I'd like to also, thank the members of the coaching staff. We have one of the biggest coaching staffs around. Larry O'Donnell and Rory McAdam and Don Morehouse do a terrific job, as well as all the support people that we have in our program. A couple of individuals helped make this program possible, and I'd just like to acknowledge them. John Herlihy, who is an alumnus of AIC, he's the president and owner of the U.S. Express Bus Company, and Wards Incorporated, and also the Jim Fenton Company, who made some donations to make this dinner possible to honor these fine student athletes. In closing, I know we only have 2 seniors on the team, Sean Navin and Rob Dow, and I think the world of both of them. They're both tremendous individuals, and I think they're the kind of people that all the underclassmen look up to, and they're going to be missed next year. But I think we've got a great nucleus coming back, and all of us here at AIC are real interested in following the hockey program and trying to attain that goal that we've been searching for, and that's to be champions of the ECAC. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Before I introduce my next guest, there's a few other people I'd like to point out that are in the crowd. One is John DeBonville, who is Director of Alumni Affairs. John was instrumental in helping us with a lot of alumni events when we played at away sites and when we held our '69 reunion. John DeBonville. The next person, some of the parents are probably a little more attuned to what this gentleman does for you, the Director of Financial Aid, Dr. Lisa Roy. Lee's staff this week banned Coach Wright from the office after harassing them all for days to find out if a student's tax form was in. Gary sometimes takes advantage of a small campus, and he gets just a little too pushy in some of the offices, so they have to take care of him from time to time. 2 other people I'd like to thank this evening. One is from the athletic department, Mrs. Seal Chosik. Without getting in too much trouble here, Mrs. C runs the department. I've been over there for 6 weeks now, and there is not a doubt in my mind that if Mrs. C wasn't there, that not a thing would get done. The next person I'd like to thank is Esther DiPaolo. Esther is the one who gets us all our recruiting checks when I get in my car and drive to Michigan. So thank you, Esther DiPaolo. Our next speaker, you'll notice that he has a doctor in front of his name now. You get a lot of degrees. Blaine Stevens recently received his doctorate, I believe, from the University of Massachusetts. I was once told that all it means when you get that PhD is it means piled high and deep, so I think Blaine can do that about as well as anyone. Gary said to me a couple weeks ago when we were thinking of speakers, he said, we need someone non-athletic to speak at the banquet. And I said, well, there's one person that foots the bill right there, is Blaine Stevens. On that note, Dr. Blaine Stevens.
I had these guys worried. They really didn't think that I had prepared anything to say tonight. And Coach Burke, the one thing that I can't figure out is that we did join together to bring Gary Wright down here from Maine. And he was going to work half-time for me, and he was going to work half-time for you. Now, for some reason, during the last 5 years, I see him about 10% of the time, if I'm lucky. Ironically enough, I hired Larry O'Donnell. Now he's the assistant athletic director. I hired Ed Shea, and now he's running the equipment room and also the soccer coach. Now, I know that there is some people on this campus that supposedly work for me, but if anyone could find out just who the hell they are and where they are, I would appreciate it. I think they're all in the gym. But ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of President Korniotis and the other members of the American International College faculty and administration, I would like to welcome you to this banquet honoring the members of our outstanding 1988-89 hockey team. When coaches Wright and O'Donnell invited me to say a few words at tonight's affair, I was at first flattered and then reminded of a story that Mark Twain told some years ago. There was a snake oil peddler in a little Missouri town who had somehow managed to alienate all the townspeople. So they properly tarred and feathered him and were carrying him through town on a rail. And one of the wiseacres that he had alienated in town yelled out to him, "Well, how you doing?" And he says, "You know, to tell you the truth, if it weren't for the honor of the thing, I think I'd just as soon walk." Well, needless to say, if it wasn't for the honor of being able to say a few words to you tonight, I think I'd just as soon be sitting out there in the audience with you. And then Larry and Gary did tell me the real reason they wanted me to say a few words tonight. They were looking to strike a balance amongst the guest speakers. And they were looking from someone from the college who is obviously non-athletically inclined. Now, Larry stole my thunder a little bit, but, you know, God knows, I don't know why the hell they selected me for that kind of a role. I'm sure there's someone in Western Massachusetts, and maybe the Western Hemisphere, who is a tad more non-athletically inclined than I am. But I guess I just happened to be here and proximity ruled. In fairness, and I do get a bad rap on that for being non-athletically inclined, some of my friends in the athletic department, particularly Commissioner Burke, know that that title of coach is one that I have long coveted. I really hate to be one of the few people, particularly since everyone else that works for me is a coach, that doesn't have that title on campus. Now, I fully admit, I don't really want to be affiliated with a specific sport, but I just want that title of coach. And then I could go out and get one of those denim jackets and right over the left breast, big 2-inch letters, coach. I might even get a matching hat, and it would either say Coach or John Deere on it, I'm not sure which. But seriously, you know, I'm aware of my limitations, and I know that I could never be an athletic supporter of Gary Wright's magnitude. Part of that is, I think, it's just because he takes everything so damn seriously. You know, I can remember trying to be, you know, the member of the AIC family that I am and trying to get around to student activities and support sports and different activities that are going on. But one of my first hockey games that I went to when Gary was here as a coach. So it was right around halftime or second period or however it's figured in that, Gary. But I walk over to the little rectangular enclosure with the plexiglass around it where Gary and the team are in, and I knock on the glass and I say, "Gee, Gary, this is a hell of a game. The kids are ahead 2 or 3 goals. I'm really enjoying it." And he gives me one of these Gary Wright smirks and just turns away and completely ignores me for the rest of the evening. Well, the next morning I'm sitting in my office and Gary comes walking down and storms in. "What the hell's the matter with you, Blaine?" He says, "That's Bush." You know how Gary waves his arm around? "That's just Bush. You can't do that." He says, "You don't understand. You cannot interrupt a coach in the middle of the game." And I said, "Well, gee, Gary, I was just trying to tell you that, you know, I was having a good time and the kids are ahead and I'm really enjoying what's going on and you're doing a great job." And I said, "Besides," I says, "often I'm sitting in my office and the door is closed and I'm talking with a kid or a parent or someone and you'll just come barging into my office and doesn't seem to bother you a bit." He says, "Well, that's different." He says, "You're the dean of students." He says, "And you do not have the same responsibilities and stress that the coach on the ice does." So I said, "Okay." That made perfect sense to me, and ever since that time, I want to be a coach. I long wanted to do that. But seriously, folks, I told you Larry is going to write some notes. Huh? But seriously, this is a special occasion. And on a serious note, I would like to read to you a short letter that I wrote to the AIC hockey team in March following the end of their season and their playoff game at Bowdoin. And it was just titled "An Open Letter to the AIC Hockey Team." And it said, "Gentlemen, I write this letter not as an individual knowledgeable about sports in general, nor hockey in particular, and God knows that's the truth, but rather as an individual who admires and appreciates positive attitudes, hard work, dedication to a cause, and outstanding sportsmanship. Each and every one of you deserves the heartfelt appreciation and respect of all members of the American International College family. You have succeeded beyond anyone's expectations, not just by being strong contenders in the playoffs, but throughout the course of the season. You have shown that not only is hockey fun and exciting to watch, but most importantly, you have demonstrated how classy AIC hockey can be. Gentlemen, my hat is off to each of you. Well, gentlemen, my hat is indeed off to each of you. You're a credit to intercollegiate athletics, and you are a credit to your college. And I wish all of you the very best in the years to come. Thank you.
A tough one to follow. Getting along with thanking a few people. One person who I would say from the psychology department who a couple of years ago came to Coach Wright and he said, I'd like to do a study on your hockey team. He still hasn't told us what he's studying, but he said, I want to do a study on your hockey team. I have some hypotheses. Well, I watched Bob McLaughlin's hypotheses and work. Bob used to bring a notebook to the games and write some of his hypotheses down. Bob turned into basically one of our biggest fans, took rides to Norwich, showed up at Bowdoin, and he's been quite a joy to have along. Bob McLaughlin from the psychology department. Two other people I'd like to thank. One is often goes unnoticed until he couldn't make a game this year. Our timekeeper, Charlie Bach. Also, a gentleman who was in charge of game management at our games this year, as well as our new equipment manager, Ed Shea. The next person, as I'm about to cut my throat here, who I'd also like to thank, when I said I was going to send out some invitations to the banquet, someone said, well, why don't you just tell this person? It'll be just as good. Tina Tui, who sponsored our hockey night T-shirt night that we held this year, has been always very supportive. Tina, as you know, is an institution in herself on this campus and very helpful to all of us. Our next speaker. When you say this man's name, no matter where you are in the Northeast, probably in the Midwest, his name is synonymous with hockey in Western Massachusetts. 3 or 4 years ago, I was the coach at Westfield State. One of the first people I went over to was to speak with Gary Dineen. I wanted some of his players. I didn't get any. It took us 4 years before we got one of his players here. He's the head coach of the Springfield Olympics. Among his many accolades, Gary has been on 2 Olympic teams. He has been a pro hockey player, a pro general manager. He's coached the Springfield Indians. He's coached them when they were the Kings, took them to a Calder Cup. For many years now, he's been the coach of the Springfield Olympics. He's placed over 200 boys into colleges across America, and definitely is synonymous with the hockey in Western Mass, and a great person, Gary Dineen.
Larry, thank you very much. Mr. Bork, Coach Stevens, and your assistants, Mr. Wright and Mr. O'Donnell, members of the AIC faculty, tremendously talented members of the AIC hockey team, and guests. Obviously, it's with a great deal of pleasure that I'm able to come here this evening and to not only see some former friends of mine that still remain as such, but to share with you an evening that should be set aside to congratulate you for your recent accomplishments. I see people like Wally Barlow, who helped me as an individual back in 1970 when I was finishing a short professional career here in Springfield. I was asked to come here tonight and to say a few words to you gentlemen on hockey and also on the job that you've done for your school, and I feel as a resident of this area, also for this town in Western New England. Some of you might not know it because of what's developed in the last couple of years, but Springfield, Massachusetts in particular, and Western New England in general, used to be a tremendously successful hockey hotbed. I can remember when I was managing the team here, the Springfield Indians, in '72, we were playing to such capacity crowds that I felt a moral obligation to give away the television rights to Channel 22, the NBC affiliate, just as a way of thanking the people in this area for supporting a sport that they and I obviously loved. Hockey was big time then. But through the next 10 years, because of mistakes that people like myself and others made in not properly promoting the sport, and because, as your athletic director previously stated, there was no hockey-playing college or university in this area to serve as a role model for the young student athletes participating in youth and town hockey programs. University of Massachusetts had dropped their program. AIC, after a tradition of outstanding hockey, similar to the great tradition that the Springfield Indians enjoyed, they too were suffering through a very dry spell. The professional hockey team was doing the same thing. So as a result, the sport that many of us enjoy and have enjoyed playing quickly took second-class citizenship to basketball and the city that's now recognized as hosting the Hall of Fame. I think what you gentlemen have done this year is tremendously significant, not just for you, but for the youngsters that will be trying to emulate you and to follow in your footsteps. I think we have a unique opportunity in this area to supply Western New England with a unique hockey program. My team, the Springfield Olympics, could, for the first time in the history of American schools or teams, with a little bit of luck, have 2 first-round NHL draft picks come June 17th in Minnesota. These 2 boys, Billy Guerin and Bob Kellogg, together received over 52 Division I scholarship offers from Michigan State all the way to Maine. I think we, in conjunction with some of the outstanding prep schools in the area, like Deerfield Academy, Loomis Chaffee, and Avon, can act as a stepping stone towards higher education and proper athletic participation. You people now, because of your competitiveness, can now serve again as proper role models for the student athlete of the future. We all read and hear about the tremendous amount of wrongdoings at the collegiate level relative to sport. I think just seeing the way you people behave on the ice and the way you properly play this game is a reflection of the belief you have not only in your coach and coaches, but in the institution that you seem proud to be a part of. You're given the opportunity to compete. And I think one of the cutest stories I've ever heard on competition was given by the former president of Hewlett-Packard, one of those great American companies situated in the Silicon Valley. Hewlett-Packard always seemed to have this ability to put the fishermen in San Francisco, the skiers in Colorado, etc. They were your model company. The president of that company was a gentleman named Mr. Young, who also served on former President Reagan's panel for American competitiveness. He likes to tell the story of 2 men, 2 friends who were out camping. Walking through the woods one day, they ran into a grizzly bear, and obviously the 2 of them quickly retreated to home. When they got there, one of the men started to put on a pair of running shoes. The other looked at him and says, "Ronnie, that's useless. You'll never be able to outrun the bear." His friend looked at him and said, "But George, I don't have to outrun the bear. I just have to outrun you." And what you people have done this year is you have outran your opposition. You've been able to take the Merrimacks, the Babsons, the Bowdens, and show them that American International College can go head-to-head with the so-called best. And no longer does Western New England, in general, ever have to answer to second-class citizenry when it comes to your hockey program. You don't have to answer to second-class citizenry when it comes to your academic pursuits, because through academic pursuit and a commitment to hockey excellence, you're going to develop into outstanding individuals. Who cares whether you make the National Hockey League? Who cares whether you're Division I or Division II, III? That doesn't matter. What does matter is that you chose to play a sport at a school you liked properly. And as a result, though you lost in the end, you were champions because you competed, and you competed well. And I mean this when I say it. For those of you who leave this area, thank you on behalf of all the teenagers from Springfield, from Enfield, from Western New England. Thank you for doing such an outstanding job as student athletes. Thank you for giving them an opportunity to see what they too might accomplish somewhere down the road. And thank you for many outstanding moments this season on the ice or watching the television where you finally got your rightful due. You had a marvelous year, and I'm very pleased that on this occasion I can be here with you to celebrate that outstanding season. Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much, Gary. Bear with me while I thank a few more people. I got that dubious task this evening. Someone who's new to the AIC community who I'd like to acknowledge has made it here tonight is our new bursar, Jim Froelich. Also, any of you who came to a hockey game this year, you walked in the rink, and there was always two people there, ready to sell you a hat, ready to sell you a sweater, being coerced by Coach Wright the day before that they had to sit in the cold rink for another 4 hours to sell them. We had to have you there. You got to be there. You got to do it. Don Miller and Jennifer Prunty, Gary's two work-study students. I'd also like to thank Nancy Shumway, a retired audiovisual department, who has all my bad jokes tonight on tape, and was very helpful in taping all our games this year. And I'd like to thank Bob Gamble and his food services for helping us to put this on tonight. Our next two speakers, simply put, leadership cannot stop on any team at the coaches. It must go to the players too. And these two gentlemen handled that task quite well this year. Our captains, Sean Navin and Daryl Fournette.
I remember the summer before I came here when I got a call from Coach Wright who asked me to, or told me that he was rebuilding a hockey team and he would like me to come visit. Well, the first thing that entered my mind was the team that I was with at the time had just gone through that, where our first year we had gone winning 10 games out of 45 and then finishing at the very bottom of the league. Well, the following year we ended up winning the whole championship and losing in the playoff finals. So I figured this would be a good opportunity for me to try it again. So when I showed up here and we ended up going 9-19 and finishing ahead of only one team, which is Larry O'Donnell's own Westfield Owls. we had a lot of trouble keeping players into our program. But Coach Wright didn't give up and recruited some more good players to eventually last year beating the old record of 21 wins. When this happened, we knew that it was because of Coach Wright's recruiting. There's no other explanation. He recruited some very good hockey players and also some very good people, knowing that these people would not give up and these people would be winners themselves. And what else?
I'll take over for Daryl now.
And because of that, Coach Wright is going to be here for a little while, hopefully, and keep up the good work. And I'd like to thank everybody who put this supper together. And hopefully next year there'll be an even bigger one with our championship.
First of all, I'd like to thank everybody for coming. Seems like tonight's turned into a shot at Coach Wright night, so I think I'm going to take mine right here. I've waited about 4 years to get this opportunity, so here it goes. I don't know if anybody knows about Coach Wright's driving record, but believe me, it's under suspect. So, first day, I think 3 years ago it was, I looked out the window. I saw Coach driving by in his Fiesta, pouring rain outside. I looked over, and there was no sunroof in the car anymore. I couldn't understand why Coach would be outside riding in the rain. So anyway, I just took a quick glance. Coach passed by. I saw him about an hour later, and he had his hand stuffed up in the window like this. I looked out, and Coach had a piece of wood up there to hold the water out. He's driving like this, trying to get out of the way. I talked to Coach a few hours later. I said, "Don't be afraid to buy a sunroof." And he looked at me and said, "Don't need it, don't need it." I said, "All right." So that was the least of the things to come. About a year later, I got into the coach's office one morning, and I said, "Coach, you look awful tired." He said, "Well, I've been in New York." I said, "What have you been doing there?" "Recruiting." And I said, "You really look beat." He said, "Well, I had to take a bus back." I said, "You took a bus back?" He said, "You went there with a car, right?" "Oh, yeah." I said, "All right." I said, you going to tell me what happened?" "Well, I was driving down the interstate, and I wanted to get off, so I went off the on-ramp, I think." I said, "Let me get this straight. You went up the off-ramp?" "Yeah." I said, "Okay." Anyway, Coach says, and on the way up, I met a truck. And I said, "It's an awful large truck, huh, Coach?" "Better believe it." And I said, "What happened?" He said, "Nothing happened to Coach. The car was demolished." I said, "Well, so anyway, getting to a more serious subject, I'd like to thank all the guys here on the hockey team for a great season. When I first got here, as Coach Burke was saying earlier, we've had great hockey tradition, and we were at a stalemate, so to speak, when I got here. And a little story there is that first got here, and Coach said, "Do you need some equipment?" And I said, "Yeah, I don't have, I got my skates, my helmet's about it." He said, "Let's go down to the equipment room. We'll find you something to wear." I said, "Great." I got down there, and I forget who was in there at the time. I think it was Charlie, and he was just looking at me like, "You want what?" I said to Coach, you know the coach, right? Coach Wright, the new one? He said to come down and get hockey equipment. And I said, Charlie just kept looking at me like, are you all right, kid? I said, "Yeah." So anyway, I got to the rink, and I had a pair of gloves that maybe Eddie Shore wore. I'm not sure. They were about 100 years old. And everyone out there was out there in black and gold pants, except for myself. I had these green, white, and blue Raider pants from Coach's high school. And I said, "Coach, did you wear these?" "Oh, yeah." And I said, and none of them had any pads. I was just all out, And I get out there, 2 different socks, and everyone's looking at me like, "Whoa, this kid's way out." So anyway, through the first 2 years, as Daryl mentioned, we had 10 wins out of about 40 games, and then last year we had 21, and this year 23. So I'd have to say that the hockey team has come a long, long way and is looking to go much further, and I wish them all good luck next year. Thank you.
Thank you. few more people I want to thank. This is more of a personal level. Two people that I have to work with the past 2 years daily. Many times we go back to my apartment and we say, why is he asking us to do this, or why is he asking us to do that? And they're always we're very supportive of each other. Our two other assistants, which I'm sure Coach Wright will get further into, but I just want to thank them personally, Rory McAdam and Don Morehouse, for their help. One other person I want to thank who's been very helpful to me, and Coach Wright probably doesn't know how helpful that she's been to him. Coach Wright, we send, as the kids will tell you, they got quite a few recruiting letters from us. And one person puts out about 90% of those that get typed, and I take credit for about 105% of them, and that's my girlfriend, Debbie. In defense of the Westfield State story, though we did finish in last, I've told this story before, but it's always worth telling again. Coach Wright's first year at AIC at the helm, he did lose to the Owls. It was a highly defensive battle, 9-8. I was the goaltender for Westfield State. I kept my goals against average intact. I later learned that Coach Wright went into the locker room after the first period, screamed at his team, said this goalie couldn't stop beach balls, couldn't stop the moon if it was shot at him. We beat them in overtime. Speaking of Coach Wright, 3 years ago, Coach Wright, he put an ad, he sent it out to all the college head coaches. He wanted a resident director, he put that first on the resume, / assistant hockey coach. I was down at Brown University working a hockey camp, and the Brown head coach showed this to me. And I knew Gary, and I called Gary up, and I said I was interested, and I came up for an interview. And I met with Blaine Stevens, and Gary said to me that day, he said, Larry, the first thing we want to take care of on this campus is the dormitory. That's going to be your first priority. I said, okay, I like people, I like kids, I think I can get it done. Whatever you do for hockey, that's gravy for us. Coach Wright called me into his office about 6 weeks later. He said, Larry, you have a priority problem here. Too much effort in the dorm and not enough in hockey. I could tell many, many stories about Coach Wright. I think I might. There are many that stick out. I will bore you with a few. We came back from a recruiting trip in Detroit last year. We left the Detroit rink at 10 p.m. We got in the car. We got over through the tunnel into Windsor, Ontario. It's approximately a 12-hour drive in normal conditions. We hit basically a blizzard. I was behind the wheel of my fine Datsun. I drove and I drove and I drove and I drove and I drove till it was about 3 o'clock in the morning, and I said, Gary, we've got to pull over. We got to get into a hotel. This is absurd. We've got the money to do it. No, keep driving, keep driving. Finally, after about 6 hours of my driving, which should have been a 2-hour drive in normal weather, I said, Coach, you got to take the wheel, Gary. You got to take it. He said, okay. We switched seats. I fall asleep immediately, exhausted. I wake up. Gary's not in the car. I look at my watch. It's 20 minutes after I gave up the wheel. I look around. Where are we? We're in the parking lot of a hotel. He gets back to the car and says, hey, did you know those roads are pretty bad out there? What Gary has done for the program, he has brought it from the bottom, as he would say, from down here, and brought it up here. He has driven a lot of people nuts. He's driven me nuts. I'm thankful for that. I've learned a lot. I think our players have learned a lot. I think our athletic director put it best to me a few weeks ago when he said, when Gary Wright came to AIC, we had a hockey team. Now we have a hockey program. And I think that's very true. The work and effort that Gary's put in is extraordinary. It's to be commended. Without getting too wishy-washy, I don't think a lot of people could have done what Gary's done here. On that note, I bring you Gary Wright.
Larry and I may have to have a little talk here in my office when we get done. He's taking a lot of credit, too, for that Westfield win over AIC 4 years ago. One of our goals went in from the red line, and the other one was from behind the net. And it was just a matter of who got the next goal, and they got that last one. What I'm going to do primarily here is just introduce each of our players to you and spend a little bit of time talking about each of them. I think basically when you're talking about any hockey team, and certainly our team, when you talk about the program, you're talking about the players. And I want to take a little bit of time and introduce each of our players to you and maybe tell you a couple of things, idiosyncrasies about them. And I'm going to ask that each player come up and receive something that we've put together, a picture of our team with a small plaque underneath. I'd also like to just thank Gary Dineen for coming and speaking to us tonight. I thought he added an awful nice dimension to tonight's program. And also Bob Gamble, who is in charge of the food service, who put this program together. I've also asked Bob if he could, there was a little bit of meat left over, if he could freeze it up over the summer, just to save a little on the budget. We can put it towards the box lunches on the Alabama trip. First of all, first player I want to talk about is Jim Agan. Jim is a forward, a junior from Colchester, Vermont, and we got Jim via some connections that I had from having played up there. A man named Tom Pearl, who was a good friend of mine, who called and said, I've got a pretty good player, and I didn't get a chance to get up and see Jim, so essentially he came down here in a walk-on capacity and made our team, and he's not the most talented player. I think he'd be the first to tell you that, but he's the kind of individual that gets everything out of him, out of his talents that he possibly can, and he's an extremely hard worker and a big part of our team. Jim? Serge, can you?
Stop. How you doing,
Next is David Bates. David is a sophomore defenseman from Holliston, Mass. And it's going to be interesting to you. I'm going to, with a lot of our players, tell you under what conditions they arrived at AIC. You're going to be surprised at the number of them that have AIC affiliations, either their coach or a principal at their high school or whatever. David played for Ed Montenuto, who was a former AIC football player, as a matter of fact. He's also a drummer, and we call it David Bates and the Buckaroos, the band. I'm not sure the official name, tend to forget that, but the band played for us earlier this year, and they're quite good. Also, David has the distinction, he goes out with co-captain Sean Navin's sister, and apparently David went in very formally about a month and a half ago into Sean's room and sat down in a chair and said, have you got a minute to talk? And Sean said, sure, Dave. He said, I was wondering if I could ask your sister out. And Sean said, I think my sister's old enough, Dave, to take care of herself. You have my full condolences. David is a good young defenseman for us, and didn't necessarily always play a regular shift, but I think one of the unique things about our program this year, we used a lot of players. And we used David in some key situations, and when he got in there, he did a very good job, and we're hoping he keeps improving. David? Next is Dan Bouchard. Dan is a sophomore goaltender from West Springfield and is a transfer from Babson College. As a matter of fact, a couple of years ago when he was at Babson, I think he had the lowest goals against in the ECAC. And by virtue of his transferring was not eligible to play this year, but will be able to play next year and the year after. And he's a very welcome addition to our program, and it's also, I think, very nice to have another local player. Dan? When Mark Buckley's parents received his grades in the mail at the end of his first semester, his dad took a look at his grade point average and remarked, "I was hoping that would be his goals against average." As a result of that rather despicable grade point average, we had to go to a wake-up program with Mark. And Coach O'Donnell was in charge of that and had to go over and wake Mark up and make sure he got off to his first class. About 2 weeks after this started, Larry went over and Mark was in bed fully clothed. And he tried to tell us that he was just so concerned about being off and ready to his test. But we suspected there was another reason. Mark is a junior goaltender from Newton, Mass, and played at Trinity Pauling for Dave Reese, who was a goaltender for the Bruins, and you can see where he got a lot of his training. And Dave called us very near the end of the season. We didn't get a chance to see him. We hadn't got a chance to see him play, and John Straffen went down and took a look at him, and John didn't know a whole lot about goaltending, nor did I, and thought he looked pretty good. And so Mark ended up coming up for a visit and coming here. So we didn't really know exactly what we were getting. And I think any of you who have seen him play will know now that what we got was a great goalie. And he was a second-team ECAC, and anybody who saw his performance in the third period of the Merrimack game would have to have been awfully impressed. Mark? Mark Capadonna is a junior forward from Marlborough, Mass. And I swear this is true, and out of allegiance to Mark, I had a story I was going to tell about a couple comments that Mark made on a bus, and he, by virtue of one of my assistants, he relayed the message to me that absolutely under no condition, because the person who was the subject of that story, which I thought was fairly harmless, I was not to tell that story, so I won't, although I'm tempted. Mark comes from a long line in Marlborough of AIC hockey people, among them Paul Pacific, who was a great player here, and Bob Anastas, who was there was an article in Slapshot about him. He's in charge of SAD program, Students Against Drunk Driving, which is nationally known and has now gone international. Mark is also the king of the one-liners and expressions. Don't profess to be a mime person, but there is in our locker room during games or between periods when one of our coaches is talking, Mark is one of these guys, you just learn the little idiosyncrasies that guys have as they're sitting there. If he's not eating oranges, he eats a lot of oranges between periods, but if he's not doing that, he just sort of follows a coach like this. And if you say something controversial, like we had explained to our players this year that picks they're not legal anymore in the ECAC. So we were going over this handout in a classroom on the afternoon of a game, and about the 10th category was picks. And of course I was going to skim over that because they're no longer legal. But I got to that, and Mark was like this with his paper. I didn't even know this, but Larry told me after. He also, we had and I'm sure there are people that can do better imitations, but that's about what it's like. We also I've explained to the team on many occasions that we've got to be very careful in how we conduct ourselves in the rink because the rink crew is very nice to us. And I said, listen, guys, if they open those doors, we got to get right off. Don't shoot pucks. Don't break the glass, whatever. And at the end of a practice, we were doing some hard sprints, and the doors opened up at the other end. And it was the rink crew, and I usually try to squeeze in, another minute or so. And Mark yells out to me, Coach, we better get right off. We don't want to upset that rink crew. Mark played with Rob Dow and Derek DaCosta on a real fine line, a lineup that gelled very, very well. And he's a real honest player and hard worker. And he's just another one of those guys we're awful glad to have in our program. Mark? You deserve it, Mark. Okay. Derek DaCosta is next, and his nickname is Julio High School. I don't know why, but I just thought I'd turn that over to you. Derek is a freshman from East Providence, Rhode Island, and is one of 4 freshmen on the team, and only losing a couple of seniors last year. We only brought in a few freshmen. And we thought we were getting a pretty good player, but we didn't know how good. And he's been a real pleasant surprise for us and has made the transition real well. Is one of the faster skaters already in the ECAC and has a bright future. Derek? Next is Rob Dow. Rob is one of our 2 seniors. He's a forward from Orange, Connecticut, and he was really involved with our first true recruiting class. We were able to bring a couple kids in that first summer that our new staff started, but he was among our first recruits from our regular season. He's about the only one left. A lot of those guys didn't stay around too long. But Rob is a Dean's List student and is interested in getting into dentistry and has really been involved, I think those of you who are familiar with his situation, with some real serious back injury that's incurred in a couple of occasions over the last couple of years. And there was some real question as to whether or not he was ever going to be able to play again. And via his determination and also his persistence, I think he went to about 10 doctors by the time he finally found one that would give him the okay. But he played all year and did a very good job for us. And one of the, I think, intriguing aspects of coaching or working at the college level is you watch kids grow. They come in as freshmen and they leave as seniors. And we've really seen him grow into becoming a true team player and providing real leadership on our team. And we're very proud to have had him, and we're going to miss him. Rob? Next is Daryl Fournette, who spoke a little bit earlier. Daryl is a junior defenseman from Verdun, Quebec, and Daryl lives up on the 4th floor of Street, where a lot of our players live, although from what I understand, with a new girlfriend, he's not around much anymore up there. We ended up with Daryl during the summer 3 years ago. I was watching some summer league hockey, and I ran into the UVM coach. And I mentioned to him that we were looking for another defenseman. And, obviously, this is about mid-July, and I knew our chances weren't real good. And Mike Gilligan mentioned to me that he had someone in mind and went out to his car and came back with a phone number, and I gave Daryl a call. I think he alluded to that when he spoke. And came up during the course of the summer, and about 3 weeks later or so, committed to AIC. And I think in a lot of respects, it was getting that type of player that Daryl is, that was sort of a real turning point in our program. Again, anybody who's seen him play and that appreciates good hockey realizes that he's just a very instrumental player, not only on our team, but in the league. And he was a first-team ECAC All-Star, which was most deserving, and he's been a real great player for us. Daryl? Next is Chris Claus. Chris's nickname is Santa, and he's a freshman forward from Chicopee, Mass, and we did not specifically recruit Chris. He tried out for the team this past fall, and we saw some ability and decided to keep him. And so he essentially came as a walk-on and has gotten better and better all the time. And he's working on a lot of things in his game and playing some summer hockey. And we're hopeful that and pretty confident that he's going to keep developing into a pretty good player. Chris? Martin Labonte is next. Martin is a sophomore forward from, a lot of times when you look in programs, they have to abbreviate this, but it's Saint Ignace de Stanbridge, Quebec. And Martin is a Dean's List student in accounting, and he's quite a character also in his own right. This past fall, just to give you an instance, we were the representative from the stick company was up, and we were giving out sticks to all of our players, and they were sort of choosing a stick and a pattern and that kind of thing. And Martin was trying out a stick and trying out this stick and trying out that stick, and I said, well, Martin, you know, if you don't score any goals this year, you can you can blame it on the stick. He said, no, I'm going to blame it on the coach. Martin centered a line with Brian Walsh and Peter Morris. They were essentially our second line. And as I was alluding to before, one of the real nice things about our team is that we got contributions from so many players. And that line was pretty much together for the entire season. And they played very, very well. And Martin was a big reason for the success of that line. He's a multi-skilled player, and we're glad he's going to be around for 2 more years. Martin? Next is Brian Lewis, and Brian is a junior goaltender from Milton, Vermont, and Brian was also via connection up in Vermont. Brian is also, probably of all our players, is one of the more students that's involved in an awful lot of extracurricular activities on campus as well. He's an RA. He's also a championship BMX rider, as a trick rider and as a speed rider or race rider, whatever they call him, and he's involved in the YJ, and he's also in charge of the personals in the YJ. If you see something in the YJ, such as Ken Mafia couldn't score with a pepperoni pizza pouch, and that appeared in the YJ, and it was from Brian Lewis was behind it. Brian is also one of the better imitation experts on the team, can do just about everybody. We ended up with Brian actually my second year. We were one of our goaltenders left the team, and we were in need of some goaltending help. And it had been the summer before that I had a chance to talk to some people in Vermont who had spoke really nicely about him, and we tried to interest him in coming down that same year. And he decided not to, and at Christmas time I got word that he was interested in maybe looking into AIC, and I gave him a call, and it was one of those unusual things. The second semester was almost about to start, and we got some assistance from John de Bonville over here, and about 4 days later Brian was accepted to the school and came in and played. And one of our big decisions when he came, he'd only been here for about 3 practices, we had RIT coming up, and they were a real powerhouse. And the decision we had to make, do we want to get somebody who's only practiced a few times like this at the college level, get him right in a game with a team of that capacity? So we decided to pass on that. It was a good thing. The final score, RIT 15, AIC 3. Another one of the long highlights back a few years ago. But from then on was our starting goalie, and this year Brian ended up. We had a very good situation with our goaltending. We used 2 almost exclusively through the season, and I think along with Mark Buckley and Brian Lewis, we had a great tandem of goaltenders. Brian. Mark Lucier is next, and we weren't sure whether he was going to be with us here tonight. He spends a lot of time up at Mount Holyoke, and Mark insists to me that it's the library that attracts him up there, but we're beginning to wonder if it's something else. Mark is a sophomore forward from La Prairie, Quebec, and is a top student and was also a member of the golf team. And it was a very interesting, when we got Martin and Mark, it was again over the summer, and I had not had a chance to see either of them play other than on a film, and they came down here. It was about 90 degrees in July, and they had already been accepted, and after their visit, and Martin's father was there, didn't know a word of English, and Martin didn't know much more, and you can imagine me trying to explain what our school's like to him. And I went over to the admissions office after they had left, and I said, geez, well, you know, I'm going to look into these guys a little more. I'm hoping we can get them. And the admissions said, well, what do you mean? They said they're coming. And I ended up making some calls around to some coaches who had seen them play, and I heard nothing but great reports. And I think any of you who have been associated with recruiting and to any degree can realize that when you get players that easy without banging your head against a wall to get them, it's a special bonus. And Mark has just done a fantastic job for us. He played on our first line with Ken Invezio this year, and is not a particularly flashy player, but is a real hard worker and is a very effective player. And I don't think anybody can forget the two big goals that he had this year in overtime, one against Babson and the other overtime goal in the quarterfinals against Salem. Mark. Don Massini is a sophomore forward from Saugus. His nickname is Dum Dum, and I think that's at his request. He's one of the few guys that came and said my nickname is. But I could tell a lot of stories about Don Massini, but not here. I will say that it's very unusual. I hardly ever see him in anything but sweats. But what I imagine is that he's got his thrown on his clip-on tie, and I'm sure he's got Steve McGowan's pants and Steve McGowan's coat. I don't know if it's still true, but Don Massini, I know his freshman year, there were 2 posters in his room, both the same, both Fred Flintstone. And everything else was on the floor. Don also, the coach at Saugus was Chris Serino, who was a great player here. And that's why we've had that long line of Saugus individuals. Chris is now the coach up at Northfield Mount Herman. Don is one of the faster players on our team and really in the league. And he's a very unheralded player, but nevertheless very valuable to us. Don? Ken Mafia is next. Ken is a sophomore forward from Hopedale, Massachusetts, and played at Mount St. Charles. I'm sure those of you familiar with hockey will be well aware that's one of the predominant hockey high school programs in the country. Just with one exception, Larry went there. But other than that, they've had some great hockey players that have come out of Mount St. Charles. Ken also is a big fan of the dog track, and although he tells me he no longer goes there, he still studies it from afar. So while most of us are looking in the paper at Roger Clemens and Larry Bird and Oil Can Boyd, I just looked this up today. I've never really looked at the dog track, but I guess Ken, Mr. Fendago did pretty well today, and Chop Suey Louie, I guess, did pretty well too. Those are unfamiliar names to the rest of us, but Ken also played on a number of teams for Coach O'Donnell. That's one of the reasons that we were fortunate enough to get him via that connection there and the friendship they've had for a while. I think in many respects, Ken epitomizes the kind of player and the style of play that we're playing now, a very puck control and offensive support type oriented system. And he's really a multifaceted player and is strong offensively and defensively, and he's just a key player for us. Ken? Sean McBreen is next. Sean is a junior goaltender from Acton, Mass. And Sean went to Acton Boxborough, which is also a program that's turned out an awful lot of good hockey players, among them Tom Barrasso. And his freshman year did not make our team and went out and played with Gary Dineen's Springfield Olympics, came back as a sophomore and made the team. And unfortunately ended up with a fairly serious ailment, a spleen thing, and was unable to play the rest of the year. Came out this year and played for us all year, and was in an unenviable position of having to be a third goaltender, which is not easy and is not a lot of fun. But he's the kind of individual that I think has the mental toughness and fortitude to be able to handle a situation such as that. And he has decided, he came in the other day, and with Dan Bouchard coming back, who will be eligible, we were still going to save a place for Sean, and he felt that, with 3 goaltenders eligible next year, and with having to carry 6 courses, that he was not going to play. And I respect that decision, and I know the rest of our team does too, and we're very grateful for his contribution. Sean? Greg Meyer is next. Greg has the nickname the Cowboy, which is an interesting, he's a sophomore defenseman from Rochester, and he also, his assistant coach in Rochester was an AIC grad. Greg also had an interesting recruiting visit here. He spent the night in jail. Apparently he was at some place at the mall. I'm not going to tell the whole story. I don't really know it. I don't want to know it. He got a little disoriented when he went out of the establishment, and I think he was following someone or something, but he got lost trying to get his way back. Couldn't find where the guys were that were hosting him, and I guess somebody finally, he ended up with a couple people, and they said, well, look, we'll get you to the nearest police station, and they dropped him off there, and he couldn't remember the name of the school he was visiting. And I arrived the next morning, and he was downstairs in the campus center, and I said, how was your visit? And he said, I spent the night in jail. So the first thing I thought is, we don't want this guy. And but we did a lot of research, and it was one of those unique situations, and Greg and I have laughed about it before. He came essentially to our program, as a walk-on. We hadn't really got a chance to assess him, and had really done an excellent job and made a big contribution as a freshman. Unfortunately, this year came down with a fairly serious injury to his knee in the Merrimack game and was unable to play the rest of the year, and it was a loss. But we're looking forward to Greg's play next year, and he's healthy again, and we're going to have him back, and that's nice. Greg? Next is Peter Morris. Peter is a sophomore forward from Bricktown, New Jersey. Every time in the locker room when we get the other team's roster, Peter always looks right down at it to see if there's anybody from New Jersey, and if there is, he always says he's a real good player. Peter is also quite a golfer. In the ECACs last fall, he came in 128th, I think it was out of 129. What had happened is the golf team needed one more player to be eligible for the ECACs, and I guess every time Peter played with a foursome, he kept explaining that I'm not really a golfer, I'm just filling in so we can play. He went to Bricktown High School down in New Jersey and was not only a great hockey player there, but also they've got one of the top football programs in New Jersey. And after he graduated from there, went to a prep school for a year, and his prep school football coach was an AIC grad. Peter, just a couple years ago, called me just a few days before Thanksgiving and said, I had never met him, and said, this is Peter Morris. I'm from New Jersey. I know you don't think much of New Jersey hockey. And I'm saying to myself, you're right. He says, but I'm a pretty good player. And so it just so happened to be he was in a college showcase tournament, and we went down. John and Larry were going down anyhow, and they came back and reported that he was a pretty good player, and I went down and watched him, and he came in. I guess we've got about 4 guys on our team here that came in at the mid-year, and he was one of them, and decided instead of using up a year of eligibility for just a half a year, he opted to just practice with us the rest of the year. He's probably one of our fiercest competitors and is extremely dedicated to our hockey program here, and I'm glad he made that call because he was a heck of a find. Peter? Sean Navin is next, one of our co-captains and a senior from South Burlington who you heard from earlier. Sean is an RA also, and along with Rob Dow is one of our veterans. Sean played at the same high school that Brian Lewis played at, and again, that was sort of how he ended up down here. And he came at the mid-year, as he told you. He's still got my blue hockey pants too, Sean. I'd like to get those back. And really, right from the outset, made a big contribution to our program. Unfortunately, Sean has been hindered by an awful lot of injuries, and ironically, both Rob and Sean have both had back problems. And this last Thanksgiving in the Merrimack game, I mentioned to you that Greg Meyer was out for the season. Sean was also injured and missed almost the whole season, came back for about 5 games. And then, and we laugh about this now, we weren't then, but Sean came back, and I got in one night from recruiting, and I had a call, and it was Mark Capadonna at the other end. And to make a long story short, what had happened, Sean and Mark were in the car. The wheel was making, if you've seen Sean's car, he's talking about my car. His car won't even start over the street. There was a rattling sound in the tire, and they stopped the car, and Sean got out, and he couldn't figure out what it was when it was stationary, so he asked Mark Capadonna to pull forward, slide into the driver's seat. Mark pulled forward and ran over his foot. It was like something out of Abbott and Costello. And so he missed the playoffs. And as I said, I told Sean, I think after it happened, it wasn't very fun at the time, but it was something down the road you can laugh about. Sean is one of our co-captains and has made just an immense contribution to the AIC hockey program. And I stated in a short piece that we did in Slapshot that he's one of those individuals whose contribution in a lot of ways transcends ice time. And he has done so much for this program on the ice and off the ice that I'm going to be indebted to him forever. Sean? When you see someone coming with black Reeboks, rolled up sweats, and a Pix jacket, you know it's Eric Nielsen. Eric is a freshman defenseman from West Springfield and played for the Springfield Olympics, Gary's program, and is one of those kind of unheralded players that's in a lot of ways has been overshadowed wherever he's been, but is a good, decent, honest player and not particularly flashy, but is one of those guys that if you're playing with him or coaching him, you come to really appreciate him and all the things he does. And he has a real nice future in this program, and we thought, again, he was one of those freshmen that just made a great transition to the college game. Eric? Next is Kevin O'Connor. And Kevin is a sophomore forward from Allen Park, Michigan. Kevin, along with Shane St. Julian, ended up coming down here over the course of the summer. They went to Nathaniel Hawthorne, and not only did the hockey program disband, but the college closed down. And they needed a place to play, and I got a call over the course of the summer. And to make a long story short, they ended up here. And Kevin O'Connor's coach told me, I wasn't receiving much from him. Shane was getting everything in, but every time I'd call Kevin, I'd say, Kevin, could you get the FAF in? Yep. Have you sent it? Yep. I called 2 weeks later. Have you sent it? Yep. And his coach assured me, he said he's one of these no-frills guys. When he arrived at Nathaniel Hawthorne, all he had is one duffel bag, all his possessions in it, and he was 1,000 miles away from home and ready to go. And he's not a star by any means, but it's a tough, intense player, and just another one of those guys that maybe doesn't show up in the scoring column a whole lot, but is just another one of those guys that does so many things to help you win. Kevin? Jeff Paolini is next, and Jeff's nickname is Elmer Fudd. And Jeff is a freshman forward from Saugus, Mass., and another one of those guys with the Saugus connection. And a couple of years ago, or actually, I guess it was just a year ago, I was up watching him play on an afternoon game, and I was standing with Took Cahoon, who at that time was the assistant coach at BU, and he said, have you looked at this Paolini? I think he's really one of the better players in the league. And that's exactly who I was there to watch. And he had a nice freshman year for us and is going to keep getting better. Jeff? Next is Vezio Sacratini. I think I have his name right. Last week when we were at the ECAC banquet, his name was mentioned a few times, and every guy had a different pronunciation. Vezio is a sophomore forward from LaSalle, Quebec, and in addition to being a hockey player here, is one of the better golfers around. I guess he wasn't quite as impressive the other day, but in the ECAC's last fall, I think he was like ranked third overall, a little better than his roommate in that match there. Vezio also speaks 3 languages, English obviously being one, and French and Italian. In fact, when I was recruiting him, his grandmother lives with him at home. And every time I would call the house, she doesn't speak any English, just Italian. She'd go, "Burp," and just slam the phone down. I guess what that meant is Vezio's not home. She never even bothered to learn he's not here. And Vezio also is one of these guys, I think our players on the team will attest, he loves his ice time. And towards the end of I guess it was our last regular season game at home, we tried at the very end of the game to get our seniors out and some upperclassmen. And Vezio came a little bit older than some other freshmen, and he goes like this to me, and he says, geez, Coach, I was wondering, I'm the age of some of those guys out there. I was wondering if I could jump out there with them. And I said, no, we'll have to wait on that. When I went up to look at a defenseman 2 years ago, it's the old story, you're going to recruit, and you're going to look at one guy, and you get attracted to another. And I saw this guy sort of doing things all over the ice out there, and I checked into him, and consequently we invited him down for a visit. And I think the best way, most of you have all seen him play and have a pretty good feel for the dominant player that he is. I guess the best way I could convey that to you is there are 16 teams in our league, and it's some 250 players. And Vezio, as a sophomore, was the ECAC Player of the Year. Vezio? Shane St. Julian is a sophomore forward from Oregon, Ohio, of all places. And Shane ended up, as I mentioned, coming with Kevin. And when I was talking to Shane's parents over the summer, the thing they kept asking me is, we want to send Shane to a college, but we don't want to send him to a college that's going to close down. And I had to keep assuring them that AIC was going to be around, had been around for a while, and would be around for a while. Shane was in a tough situation this year. Sometimes it's difficult transition for somebody either coming from high school or another college where they've been a regular and maybe not playing quite as much as they did before, and was in and out of the lineup, and that's not an easy situation by any stretch of the imagination, as I think I mentioned when I was talking about one of the other players. He handled it very well, and I think that says a lot about Shane, and he's very well liked by his teammates, and everybody's pulling for him to keep improving. Shane? Tony Saracola is next. Tony is a sophomore defenseman from Waterville, New York, and Tony is also a kicker on the football team. Earlier in the year when we played at the Plattsburgh tournament, He was unable to be with us the second day because there was one game it was arranged that he would have to miss if he was going to play both sports, and ended up going with us on a Thursday up to Plattsburgh, playing the game on Friday night. After the game, he jumped in a car with my brother, drove to Burlington, Vermont, about an hour and a half to 2 hours, got up the next morning at 6 o'clock, took a flight down to Virginia, or West Virginia, and took another hour and a half drive to the field, got there like a couple hours before the game, kicked a couple of field goals, and then had to ride in a bus about 10 hours back. Tony and is Peter Morris's roommate, and there's a story or two I was going to tell, but I think I'll hold off on that. We had originally, with Tony, he came and visited the school, and I had Larry go up and take a look at him, and Larry came back and said, geez, I think there's a pretty good player. And I went up and watched him 2 times, and he was predominantly a forward. And when we got here, we asked him if he'd be interested in playing defense. Maybe we told him, I don't know, but either way, it was a mutual decision. And he made the transition very easily. And I think that, Kevin Wertman and Daryl Fournette are certainly 2 great defensemen and get an awful lot of recognition. But I think guys on our team and people that are associated with our program know that Tony's not far behind. He's an excellent defenseman, and he's another one of those guys that is a reason that we've come where we have. Tony? Bill Taggart is next, and I think I had that wrong on the roommate. Actually, it's Tony and Bill, I think, are roommates. Bill is a sophomore defenseman from Streetsville, Ontario, and John Straffen, who was with us a couple of years ago, spent a lot of time up in Ontario, and he's the one who saw Bill and saw him several times and reported back here that he thought he would be someone that could really help us out. Bill's dad is the chief of police for the whole Mississauga area, and I think it's about 1.5 million people or something like that, the district. And Bill is following in his father's footsteps, maybe not exactly, but wants to be a lawyer and is an excellent student here. And I don't think there's any question that he's going to attain that hope that he has to be a lawyer. He is a defensive defenseman, and I think that, you need all types of players when you constitute a team, and we have an awful lot, as many of you know. We try to get our defensemen really incorporated in the offense, but by the same token, you need some defensemen that are sort of stay at home and are strong defensively, and Bill is just such a player, and he lends real stability to our defensive core, and we're looking for a couple more years of real good play out of him. Bill? Next is Brian Walsh, is a junior forward from Medford, Mass. And Brian and Mark Capadonna have been roommates for the last 3 years. And the first 2 years, I think, I don't know if you've ever tried to wake up Brian Walsh out of a dead sleep, but that was Mark's responsibility every morning. And Brian also, when he was here his freshman year, we have all of our freshmen involved in a study hall, and we have a tutor who was doing a lot of work with him, and she said to Brian, listen, if you keep working hard in this course, you're going to end up with a B. And Brian said, the only B I've ever seen stung me. Brian is also, Jeff Arnold, who played for us a couple of years ago, was married, and Brian is also married, and there's another little Walshy due in a couple of months. He is one of our hardest working players, one of our most intense players, and also can lend some big goals as he has done. And Brian has really done a great job for us in a lot of ways. Brian?
Hair Club. Hair Club.
Next is Kevin Wertman. Kevin is a sophomore defenseman from Saugus, Mass. And I've got one story on Kevin I think bears repeating, and we laugh at ourselves a lot on this team, so I'm sure Kevin will get a kick out of it too. Last fall, Mark Buckley, Ken Mafia, and Kevin Wertman were in the parking lot over at Magna. This is on a Sunday, okay? In the fall, the colleges play on Saturday, the pros play on Sunday. This guy in a Notre Dame t-shirt comes up and asks, there was two high school teams that were actually using the field on this particular day, our AIC field, and this boy in a Notre Dame t-shirt comes up and asks the three of them, how do you get to the field? So they gave him directions, and as they left, Kevin looks at the other two guys he's with and says, AIC's playing Notre Dame in football today? Kevin is a dominant player on our team and in our league. Is a real good bet to be drafted in the NHL draft this year. There were several teams that were following him, not only at home but on the road as well. He's talented and has a great work ethic, and one of the nice things, you know, when you have a real good player is a guy that also has some humility, and Kevin has that, and he's just been a great addition to our program. Kevin?
Have another cheeseburger.
Serge Ledkowski, I'm moving along to our manager. Serge is a freshman from Shirley, New Jersey. He is one of those I'm from New York, I'm sorry. Serge is also a real big hockey fan, and I was going to say Ranger lover, but that wouldn't be fair. He's a Islanders and a lot of other teams. I got a couple of just quick Serge short stories here. When you look for a manager, I think the best combination, you want a guy that nobody's going to give a hard time, but also adds that dimension of humor to a team. When we were up at Plattsburgh after the second game, I was out in the parking lot loading up the van, and Serge and I sort of passed each other, and he looks at me and he goes, Coach Wright, funny seeing you up in this area. You're the second AIC person I've seen today. Salem State, third period. Election night. 12 minutes left in a close game. On the bench. Coach, I wonder who's winning the election. At Fitchburg, not a highlight of the season. Any of you know, it was a disastrous night. In the third period, Serge says, and the whole team can hear him, he's on the bench with us, I can't believe I came up to watch this atrocity. This is a complete waste of my time that I have to come up here and see you guys play like this. Rob Dow turned around and told him to shut up, but you don't shut Serge up, I'll tell you. But in a lot of ways, Serge has been invaluable to our program, and being a manager is not an easy job. And we've sort of gone through our share of managers, and it was a big accomplishment for us this year in and of itself to keep a manager for a whole year. But he's developed a great amount of respect on the part of the players and the coaches, and I can't emphasize that he's an awful big part of our program. Serge? I'm just going to quickly here say a couple of words about our assistants and then wrap it up. Rory McAdam is one of our is our grad assistant here in the program, and is from Cobourg, Ontario, and went to Geneseo State, and has had the distinction the last couple of years. He works with the Sakirka family, who I think everyone knows, in a capacity of working with asbestos. Rory had a rather auspicious introduction to AIC hockey. 2 years ago, in the summer before he came down, we had forgotten to set up his visa situation. And I told Rory, I don't think there's any problem, Rory. Just tell him at the border that you're coming down and the visa thing is getting straightened out. And I think there's such a thing as a temporary visa they'll give you for a couple of days. Well, he stopped at the first customs, and they didn't have any, they said there was no such thing, they weren't going to let him in. So he went to the second one, and he figured, I better tell a story like I'm going to go down to the U.S. to visit a friend and just for a couple of days. Well, he told them that, but they looked in the back of his car, and it was just piled high full of stuff. They ended up tearing the car apart and finding a letter, an acceptance letter from AIC to the graduate program. And the guy said, all right, so you're a liar too. And they threatened to impound him and one thing and another, but finally let him go. If any of you know how neat Rory is, just having them tear apart his car, I'm sure was a trial in itself. He ended up finally getting down here, and a few months later had his Mazda, his car stolen, and it was quite a debut. Rory is also one of these guys, as I was mentioning about. Occasionally, he and Larry will get, and Larry pulls a little one on him, as those guys do on me too. They were in the car. They'll be in the car, and Larry will say to Rory, you know, geez, your car's looking a little dirty today. And Larry said, lo and behold, every time he says that, the car's washed within about 3 hours. Rory was given a lot of responsibility here with face-offs, did an awful lot of behind-the-scenes work, probably of all our coaching staff. He spent as much time as any of us, and in a lot of respects more, just working with guys on the little idiosyncrasies of the game. And he just, again, you know, sometimes you try to say in a couple of short sentences what individuals mean to a program, and try to wrap up something that's a 2 years contribution. It's not easy. So I'll just say that Rory's done a great job. It's been fun to work with him, and we're very happy that he's going to stay in the area. Rory?
Hello. Rory, stand up, Rory.
Next is Don Morehouse. And Don is a graduate of Cathedral High School, played here locally, was an English major, and is doing some grad school work now. I emphasize the some. He also was in charge of the Slapshot, our hockey newsletter. And Don is also involved with the Breakdown Band, is forever chasing all over New England with them. You can tell by his haircut he's involved with the band. And Don also has the distinction, he's a collector of cars. I shouldn't say collector, but he just keeps buying one car after another. And any one time he has about 4 of them around the AIC parking lot. He also has about 100 parking tickets. And he's wanted by the police, or I should say security. So I don't know if he has to be too worried, but Don has been in a little trouble with that. He also, in our program, essentially has worked in a volunteer capacity. And again, Don is one of these guys. I dealt with him as a player for my first 3 years here. He's been with us as a coach for 2 years. And again, as I was saying with Rory, it's very difficult to sum up just how much he's meant to not only myself, but our players and our program in general. And we were very, very happy to have him work with us, and we know he's going to stay close to the AIC hockey scene. Don? Wally Barlow, our trainer, there are a lot of Wally stories. He's 70-plus years old, and is just a marvelous individual. Many a late-night bus ride I've sat with Wally and listened to some of his old Eddie Shore stories. They change a little bit from time to time, but that's part of storytelling. He is known about 25 years ago. Some doctor told him it was all right for him to stitch people up. I don't think for the last 20 years trainers have been allowed to stitch, but he has a special grandfather clause, indigenous only to himself. He also, there's not a player here that hasn't been called a big baby. I've been called a big baby. And he's also, for his age, is one of the feistier type guys. We were over at RIT 2 years ago, and it was they draw really well over there, and there was a lot of noise in the rink. And the refereeing was not the best, and I just remember just sort of in the middle of the game, we were losing the game and looking down the bench, and there's Wally leaning over the boards yelling, he's picking him, he's picking him. He's yelling to the refs. And I think if some of you knew, we spoke before the Babson game a little bit about Wally's situation. And he's got some situations at home that are not the easiest. His wife had some physical problems, and his son suffered a heart attack, although he's doing much better last year. And his daughter-in-law had a stroke at a very young age running. And Wally, at his age, essentially is the individual who keeps that household together. And it's just remarkable to me, you know, in the setting that he's in right now and the work that he does and the compassion that he shows on the home front. And at his age, he's still able to be a trainer and have almost a regular work schedule. I think there's a lot to be learned from him. I can say as a coach that I feel just so fortunate that I've had an opportunity to work with him and get to know him, and I've learned a lot more from him than he could ever possibly imagine. So I'm going to have Wally in it. It might, if anybody's ever seen Wally walk out onto the ice with an injury, he takes his time, but I'd like him to walk up here and receive one of these plaques also. Wally's still got that English accent. The last individual that I want to talk about a bit here and is Larry O'Donnell, who was our MC tonight. He's not going to be our MC next year, but he was tonight. Larry is in his third year, and as he mentioned to you, he's a graduate, or not a graduate, but was the coach at Westfield State and also played there, and then finished up at the University of Massachusetts, where he's also received his graduate degree. Have you got that master's now, Larry? How time skips by. I guess it was a year ago. Larry, I could tell you a few things about him. He was alluding to his Datsun car. It has 219,000 miles on it. And the hood, maybe it's been fixed now, but it's tied down. Just the other day, and this about sums up Larry with his car, we were over at the tennis match, and we noticed that the tennis coach of St. A's was their assistant hockey coach, so we went over to visit him. And as Larry was pulling out, we noticed that there was hardly any, his tire was essentially flat. And he pulled out of the parking lot, and some guy from across the way said, "Hey, Larry, you got a flat tire." And he just kept on driving. His car is you could hold a scavenger hunt in that car. McDonald's wrappers, half-eaten subs, frozen M&Ms, you name it, it's in that car. And which leads me to, Larry is also a connoisseur of snack bars. Any rink that he's been into, and he's been in hundreds of them literally over the last few years, he can tell you not only about the hockey players in that rink, but also the snack bar. We were over back in January. This was a very revealing moment for Larry and I. We had a late night dinner. We had been watching a tournament, and we pulled out. It might have been Larry's second dinner. I don't remember. We pulled out, and Larry said, "You know, I think I have an eating disorder." He also is one of these guys that is very persistent in his own way. A couple of years ago, he got on himself that the U.S. League, which is out in the Midwest, had some real fine hockey players, which they do. But it's 1,000 miles, you know, across the country. And one day he'd come in, first of all he broached, he said, I'd be willing to drive my Datsun 1,000 miles, this is in the dead of winter, out to Iowa and Minnesota to look at these players. And I said, Larry, we've got to direct our efforts here in the East. The next day he comes, says, geez, they're really pulling them out of that U.S. League. And this would just go on for days and days, and I finally had to say, Larry, I don't want to hear any more about the U.S. League. Final story, Larry is not a shy individual, as I think any of you who are associated with him know. In fact, if you don't know him, you picked up quickly here that he's not. We were up watching a game at New England College 2 years ago. This is when Larry came in, like anyone, even the biggest of extroverts, he was a little tentative at first, wanted to work well with the head coach, that kind of thing, didn't want to ruffle anyone's feathers. We left the New England game, we were up there scouting, and it was about 0 degrees out. This is in December. We're driving down the interstate. So my car didn't have much heat in it anyhow, but I turned the heat off. And I said, geez, Larry, you know, by now it's about 35, 40 degrees at most in the car. And I said, geez, Larry, the one thing about this car, it's not in very good shape, but it's got great heat. And by then, you know, I had the vent on, and it was direct cold air running onto Larry, and he had his feet up on the chair, on the seat. And I think about 15 minutes later, I mean, by now I'm freezing. I conveyed to him what we were doing. Also, Larry, just a couple other things. I think any of you who know him or who have dealt with him, he's dedicated an awful lot to hockey and has been involved for a long time in leagues. Back when he was at Mount St. Charles, ran several summer leagues, and as I mentioned, was Ken Mafia's coach. He's one of those guys, I think, from a very young age was sort of destined for this profession. Works at the SVS Hockey School and the Exeter Hockey School every summer. He's been on those staffs for a number of years. With our program, he works with the goaltenders exclusively, and everybody knows how our goaltending has come out. With the penalty killers, exclusively this year. We turned that over to him. Does a lot of scouting, and the recruiting that he does for us in many respects is unbelievable. The amount of time that he's put into this program. And I think in a lot of respects, one of the nicest things, he had alluded to it earlier, the number of hours that he's put into this program that was, as he said, was able to get a real job or a full-time position on campus here, I think is one of the nicest things this institution could have done. And again, in addition to our other assistant coaches, and even Larry has probably put in, you know, as much time as I have into this program. I don't think there's any question about that over the last couple of years. And he's been invaluable to us, and he's going to be a great head coach someday. Larry? And finally, I just want to, Larry and I basically worked out before this banquet tonight that so I wouldn't get in a situation where I was giving a whole long list of thanks. I just want you to know that a lot of the people that Larry thanked, that was a cooperative effort, and certainly my feelings are very, very similar. I don't know if I'm going to call Dean Stevens coach, but otherwise the feelings are very similar. I'd also like to just extend a thank you to the parents of this program. I know a lot of you are here tonight. Some were not able to make it, particularly we have a lot of kids. We probably have as much geographic representation on this team as any team here in the East, and obviously there are a lot of kids' parents who for one reason or another were not able to come but have supported us in so many other ways. I played at a small prep school up in New Hampshire, and my father was my coach. And I really didn't know, as I was growing up, any different then. I guess if I even thought about it, I presumed all parents were that way. But one of the things that I really appreciate in my particular father now is that when I was growing up, and obviously I was pretty engrossed in the game from a very young age, it was mainly because he encouraged me. And you see a lot of the sickness out there of parents that try to live through their kids and push them unmercifully and really take a very good experience and make it a bad experience. And I think in my father, I'm so appreciative. My brother, for instance, is 5 years younger than me and played a lot of youth hockey and then got out of the game for a couple years, and it was, my parents didn't have any problem with that at all. And I think I really, now that I'm older and I understand it, I really appreciate that probably more than anything else he ever could have taught me in terms of X's and O's or what have you. And one of the nice things, I think, with our parents here, I think that they have it in perspective. We've made an effort in our recruiting. We've tried to get sophisticated to the point that we not only look at the player, but we also look at the parents. And I think that's one of the reasons that we have such, quality kids in our program, and we really make an effort to make sure they're quality, I think, is because of their parents. And I just want to basically sort of say in a general way that we really appreciate all the support that you people have given us as well. And finally, to the administration here at AIC, John Fallon and Rich Bedard and Lisa Roy and John DeBonville and a lot of the other people that were mentioned tonight, and especially for Dean Stevens. He's still going to shake his head this July and go, another hockey game, when I'm heading out to watch them. But in so many respects, he's been very supportive, and I'm most appreciative of that. And also to Bob Burke, our athletic director. 2 years ago, when I came off my third losing season, and it had been a rough going in a lot of ways for a lot of us associated with the program, he called me in at the end of the year in his office and said, I just wanted to tell you that we like what's happening with the program, and we're behind you 100%, and we aren't concerned right now, with how many games you're losing and that type of thing, because the wins are going to come. We just like what's happening in this program. And I think the message that was sent to me in that meeting, you hear a lot about coaches on the chopping block and how you got to win, and winning is the only thing. And it's an important part, but I think there's an awful lot of things that are even more important. And I'm very appreciative, and I think as a coach who had only been a head coach for 3 years, to get that kind of support meant an awful lot. And I think that moment, probably more than any in my last couple years, meant a lot, and I appreciated that. And finally, we'd like to thank you all for coming. I know that our players share in extending our appreciation for your support, and the achievements that we experienced this past season are something that all of us, players, coaches, administrators, faculty, staff, students, fans, can be proud of. Thank you, and that's it.